Tom, whether you can let me know if we're now live and streaming. So welcome Hub members, welcome other members and officers, and any members of the public who are listening. We'll move forward to item 1 on the agenda. Apologies for absence. I think we've had one apology, Mr. White.
That's correct. Thank you, Leader. Good afternoon, everyone. We've got an apology for Councillor Daniel from this afternoon's meeting. Thank you, Leader.
Thank you. Item 2 is declarations of interest. Members are invited to declare any personal or disclosable pecuniary interests, including the nature and extent of such interests they may have in any items to be considered in the meeting. Does anyone wish to declare any interest in any items on the agenda? I have nothing coming forward, Mr. White. Item 3 is items requiring urgent attention. I've not been advised of any.
Me neither, Leader.
Thank you. Item 4, confirmation of minutes. The minutes of the meeting held on the 13th of July 2021. If we can go through these for accuracy and other comment. So anything, members, on page 1. Page 2. And page 3. In which case, can I take it that we accept the minutes as a true record of the meeting? I'm happy to sign those later, Mr. White. Thank you, members.
Thank you, Leader.
Item 5 on the agenda is public questions, and again, I haven't been advised of any. Item 6 is the Hub Committee forward plan. The forward plan has been circulated to members, consists of a record of future topics that are going to be discussed at future meetings. I'd ask if anyone has any comments about those topics in terms of accuracy or any other issues. Councillor Cheadle.
I just wondered whether it would be wise to put in a marker for reviewing the delivery plan as a hub activity.
Thank you. I guess that would need to be aligned with the meetings of the advisory groups as they come forward. So perhaps Mr. White and I can arrange that and insert something suitable into the plan. Thank you. Councillor Mott.
Thank you, Chair. Just being a bit pernickety, I appreciate it is a forward plan, but I always struggle to understand why we have a forward plan which details the items that we are discussing on the day.
I can't really answer that other than for the sake of completeness, but
It's purely a timing issue for you, Leader, in the sense that we're required to publish a forward plan 28 days before the next meeting, if you like. So this is, you're right, so it does in effect show the list of those items to the first meeting and the next 3 months after. So it's a timing issue whereby we publish in advance and it's the most recent. I mean, we have before looked at potentially putting draft plans on, but they tend to change. So this is the most recently published one, but take the point, it does reflect those items which are on this meeting agenda as well.
thank you. Thank you. Any other comments, members? In which case, if we have noted the forward plan, and I think that can be recorded, Mr. White. Thank you. The next item on the agenda, members, is the plan for West Devon, which I'm introducing. In front of you are the papers relating to the plan for West Devon, a document and a plan which has been in the making now for a number of months. I hope you'll agree that the plan is an impressive and useful document, framing the themes and objectives that we as a council feel are important and that should inform our work over coming years. Attached to the plan are the thematic delivery plans, which identify the specific tasks, timelines and targets that we will be working on over the next 3 years. It's important to recognise, I think, that the plan will not be perfect in its present form. It will not do everything that everyone wants it to do, but it will remain a working document which can be amended and improved via the Hub advisory groups as times go on and as priorities change and become clearer. Hub lead members and their advisory groups will have an important role to play here in delivering the plan, monitoring performance, and horizon scanning to identify future issues. At this point, can I thank all of those officers, members, consultees and partner organisations who have had input into the plan. This has been a team effort, ably coordinated by Mr Hawke and Mr Powell and their teams. I was especially pleased to note the inclusion of some fantastic photographs showcasing West Devon, all taken and submitted by residents, and I thank them for their work and their permission to use their pictures. It's especially pleasing to note feedback from Devon County Council, noting the synergy between our plan and their emerging plan, and this bodes well for future cooperation on a number of important issues. The recommendations on the report are that members note the results of the consultation on the draft plan and ask that the plan be approved for submission to Council next week, and also seeks approval for funding to be allocated to deliver the plans as we progress. Further work will be carried out on the detailed financial planning through the budget process over the next few months. Members who have already had input into this plan, the draft has been well received and it really provides us with a framework to work to over the next few years. I commend the plan to you and seek your support to carry it forward, and will happily take any questions that members might have at this stage. Councillor Cheadle.
Thank you very much, Neil. First of all, I'd like to add my congratulations to the team that pulled this together. It's a good-looking plan, I have to say. My question, though, is how we're going to amend it when it requires amending. You mentioned the work of the advisory groups, and the advisory groups clearly will come forward from time to time with things that they wish to change in their particular area of the thematic plan. But it's the council's plan. It's not one advisory group's plan. So I think we need just to think at some stage, not necessarily today, but we need to think somehow when we've collected a sort of bag of potential amendments, how we're actually going to affect those amendments. Some will have budgetary implications, some might not, but some might actually, be second thoughts on what the public's been told. So we do need some sort of process by which we amend it.
Thank you, Councillor Cheadle. As you quite rightly say, the advisory groups are not decision-making bodies, and I see that process very much as being one that lead members will work on to formulate and bring up to speed plans that are considered important, that will then come through the hub or on occasions through council for decisions, but will also dovetail into, as we have to now, the annual budget making process, because it's clearly important that we cut our coat according to our cloth and deliver things that we are able to do in terms of resources. So I think that probably does need a bit more thought. It will evolve, I'm sure, as things develop, and I appreciate your input and your comment, but that's how I see it happening. I think Councillor Hipsey had a question.
And I think paragraph 4 seeks to distill the feedback from the public consultation, and it points out that residents commented on poor transport links, lack of truly affordable housing and low-paying jobs. And I was just wondering whether, given that there were 375 responses, which I think is magnificent, whether that was all that was kind of distilled out of that, or whether there were any other comments that that might be of interest, and if so, what is the mechanism by which members can see that, please?
Thank you. I wonder if I can bring Mr. Hawke in on that, because I believe there is a process to provide the full details of those comments via the advisory groups for further discussion.
Thank you, Leader. And thank you, Councillor Hipsey, for your question. Yes, we're currently collating the full responses from the consultation, so they will be shared with all members this week. I was hoping it would be before today, but we're just going through, because of the volume of responses, it's a belt and braces just to check that no personal data or anything's been included in the response, because sometimes we can publish them and then find personal data. So we're just going through and doing that sort of evaluation, but then the moderation, and then not moderation of the responses, moderation of the, just to double check. And that'll be with members later on, hopefully later on today, but it might be in the next couple of days.
Splendid.
Certainly before council.
Through you, if I may, Leader, just to say thanks, particularly to Mr. Hawke, for that. I think it's just pertinent and important that all members see that sort of data before full council. Thank you.
Yes, thank you, Councillor Hipsey. Councillor Ball, you have a question.
Yes, thank you, Leader. It sort of follows on from Councillor Hipsey's point, I think. So some of the obviously we've had this feedback from the people who've submitted their responses to the questions and so on. I suppose the follow-on work from that will then be picked up by the different working groups, will they? Is that the intention? Because obviously, having the plan is a structure that we are working from, but a bit like Councillor Cheadle alluded to, there will be change as things sort of, we pursue something. So it'll be, perhaps a little bit more understanding of how you see that developing will be helpful, please, Leader. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. Yes, I do see things working in that way. Of course, it's our role then, I think, as members to note those comments and that feedback, to distill it, to consider what we should be doing and what we shouldn't be doing, and how we bring it about, and then whether it's something that we can resource, and what the impact of that is likely to be. So there's a whole range of issues that we then need to take into account when we're considering what we do bring forward, and that's the role that I see the advisory groups fulfilling. Yep, please carry on.
May I have a supplementary? Yeah, and you alluded to the Devon County Council plan. Having a wider understanding of that, I think probably could be useful. I mean, obviously not in detail necessarily, but an overview of that might be useful if that's not been considered already, which I'm sure it has.
Yes, thank you, Councillor Ball. The Devon plan is still in development. We have seen the key principles, and it was very much remarked on that our plan aligned very closely with those key principles that are emerging. I think that is a really important aspect of this whole process, because clearly we do need to work with other tiers of government and other agencies in order to bring about a number of things that are going to make a difference to residents in this area. We will definitely leverage more in terms of resources if we can work with Devon County, particularly on specific issues in which they take the lead. And I think the fact that we have a coherent, well thought out plan will help us in putting our case forward to Devon when it comes to bidding for resources and projects on which we will work together. So I think it's really encouraging. Members, any other questions? Councillor Cheadle.
It's really a question for Chief Exec, and that is, at the outset of this, we had a concern that our plan and South Hams's plan might sort of grow differently, in a sense, and officers would then be in their sort of interesting position of having to sort of look two directions at the same time. I just wonder, has South Hams and our plan evolved in a way that makes that less of a risk?
It's a very interesting question. Thank you, Councillor Cheadle. I think what we have is both plans have a high degree of alignment around the key issues. Many of the key issues for South Hams and West Devon are very similar. But importantly, what we've done is to work with you to ensure the plan reflects the subtlety and importance of the things for you in West Devon as members and with South Hams members as well. So rather than a plan which has been in effect implemented onto both councils, we have a bottom-up process which means that the plan truly reflects the needs of your communities. As a result, whilst there are many common features, there are some elements which are distinct to each plan, and I think that's right and appropriate. We have one set of officers, we are supporting two councils, and we're supporting two communities. What we have done, of course, is make sure that each of the plans is thoroughly resourced, and as a result of that, we're confident that we can deliver both of them, both jointly and separately. Thank you.
Thank you. Does that help, Councillor Cheadle? Thank you. Any other questions, members? In which case, if I may, I'd like to move the 5 recommendations which are shown on page 1 of the agenda paper document. If I could have a seconder for those recommendations, please.
I'm happy to second those.
Thank you. Members, we move into debate. Any discussion? Okay, the plan is obviously working and quite clear, so I take comfort from that. We'll move to a vote, but perhaps I'll get some advice from Mr. White. Should this be a recorded vote in view of the commitment of funds that is?
It doesn't have to be, Leader, but I mean, we're being live streamed. I mean, if it is the wish of the meeting, a quorum members want to have a recorded vote.
In which case, I think we'll just move to a show of hands, if that's okay. So, all those in favour?
That is 8 and unanimous. Thank you, Leader.
Thank you, members. If we can move then to item 8 on the agenda, which is AUX funding electric car charging points, and I believe that Councillor Pearce, you've been volunteered to introduce this one.
Thank you, Leader. Yes. It's quite a comprehensive report, which I'm sure all members will have read thoroughly, but I will cover the main points in my presentation. West Devon Borough Council has joined the Devon and Torbay Residential Chargepoint Scheme project, which is a partnership with other local authorities and being led by Devon County Council to install electric vehicle charging points in our council-owned car parks, as set out in paragraph 1.3. This is in addition to the Deletti scheme project that we're involved in for bringing vehicle charging points into our main car parks, which was well underway before, or the process was well underway before this latest one came forward. Funding for the project has been received from the Office for Zero Emission Vehicles in respect of the Devon and Torbay Residential Chargepoint Scheme. As a result of the Devon and Torbay Residential Chargepoint Scheme, electric charging points will be installed in the following car parks subject to the necessary surveys being carried out. Excuse me. The one at Pilgrims Drive car park at Birolston, which is, falls under West Devon Borough Council's control. This report seeks members' agreement to enter the required collaboration agreement, and this documents our commitment to proceed with the Devon County Council-led procurement of an approved supplier, and thereafter enter 10 years of the required car parking spaces to the appointed supplier. Please note, this does not restrict our ability to charge parking fees for those spaces. We don't at the moment, but it covers anything that if we should use this any of our other car parks. The Council's Better Lives for All corporate strategy sets out our commitment to leading by example in reducing our carbon footprint. The Council has taken significant steps across the district to enhance the network of EV charging points available to residents and visitors alike. We have already completed or are in the process of installing in the following, as you will be aware: one at Kilworthy, which has been here for some time, and under the Deletty project, we have plans for Bedford Car Park, Abbey Car Park, Mill Road Car Park, and the Chadford Car Park, and also Hatherley. This latest one it comes forward because Bear Alston Parish Council originally requested to be involved in the ORSCS funding bid with Devon County Council to install a charger at their village hall car park. This car park is well used by users of the village hall, and therefore they requested that Pilgrims Drive car park, which is owned by ourselves at West Devon Borough Council, was considered as a better location for the installation of the electric vehicle charging point. The procurement process will look to deliver 22 kilowatt dual charge points per allocated car park, high levels of interoperability, no membership fee and payments using contactless technology, all design, build, operational and maintenance costs covered by the contractor for the period of the lease. This includes any grid charges or ongoing electricity supply, and potential for rental income from the contractor, although this will be subject to negotiation and part of the tendering undertaken by Devon County Council. Therefore, I place before you the recommendations from 1 to 3. If there are any questions, I am willing to take them, and also Mrs. Widdicombe is here to assist me if there's anything that I'm not capable of answering. Thank you, Leader.
Thank you, Councillor Pearce. Members, any questions? Councillor Mott.
Thank you, Chair. I have a couple of questions, if I may, please. Can I ask what happens at the end of the 10-year agreement?
I would imagine we could renegotiate, but I will pass to Mrs. Widdicombe, please.
Yeah, no, that's correct. We've got the ability to either renew the contract for a longer period of time, or we can say, actually, we don't need to renew your equipment, we're going to get the suppliers, or it leaves us open to make those decisions.
Thank you. And can I ask where we are with the Deletty project, please?
I will pass to Mrs. Widdicombe. I think we're making good progress.
So I think we acknowledge that obviously the Deletty project has been quite slow. It's quite a complex project which involves a lot of partners, and we also need to work with Western Power Distribution to get the grid connections. So we've been finalising the quotes for the works for Western Power, and we've also been working with the legal departments of Scottish Power and also ourselves for finalising the leases. So we're getting to that point now where we're going to be signing the leases in the next few weeks, and then works will be underway. So I would hope that in the autumn we will see at least one of the electric charging points installed in the car park. But I can give you a better programme of works once we finalise signing of the leases.
Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Ball.
Thank you, Leader. Just a quick, just make sure I've understood this correctly. The 10-year lease covers the payment of the electricity and the maintenance of the equipment. Is there any payment then by users? I'm sorry if I missed what you said. Just clarification of that would be really helpful, please. Through you, Leader. Thank you.
Yes, I mean, the agreement covers the cost of the electricity, but obviously anyone using the charging point will pay for the power they use by using their card. Sorry if I wasn't clear on that. My apologies.
No, you probably said it, but I missed it. And the same with the maintenance of the equipment. If anything goes wrong in that 10 years, is effectively covered by this by the funding that's been released. Yes.
That is my understanding, but I will pass to Mrs. Widdicombe just to confirm that, please.
Yes, that's correct. The appointed supplier will have full responsibility for the electric charging points. So any vandalism, maintenance issues, that will all be covered by the supplier and will be at no cost to the council.
Thank you, Leader. Yeah, that's really good news, and I, hope that we find a way of celebrating this, because I think it's really important that the communities see that we're trying to do something like this. So, yeah, thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Cheadle, you had a question.
I just wondered if it says in Para 213 that Devon County Council are aware that there are some sites that didn't qualify, but they're keen to sort of do more. Is there a genuine appetite to actually increase the number of electric charging points in the borough? And if communities, having seen this one, sort of get an appetite for it, is there somewhere they can go to explore whether they can get an electric charging point system working in their car park?
I think the Devon County are. I mean, there's going to be extra funding coming forward. Unfortunately, it appears that not many parish councils took up the offer, which Bear Alston did when the original notification went out. But with what we have to realise with the Bear Alston one is that, and it's going to happen in a lot of our towns in West Devon, and plus across the country, is that it's very difficult to put a charging point in a street where you've got terrace cottages right up on the street. But to answer your question more fully, there will be opportunities for parish and town councils to apply in the next round of funding, and I think that's,
I mean, the two car parks at Yelverton are actually owned by Maristow Estates, and I just wondered if there's an opportunity for Maristow to apply to have electric charging points put in their car parks.
I'll pass to.
That might be a
Mrs.
difficult
Widdicombe.
question to answer on the hoof.
It will be with. Well, yeah, I'll pass to Mrs. Widdicombe, but my own view is that they could apply if they wanted to.
Okay.
But it might have to be done through the parish council, but I'm not sure.
Okay. Thanks.
I can't give you a 100% answer on that, but what I will do is speak with Devon County Council and find out what the criteria is for that and come back to you. Devon are really keen to be working with parish and town councils, and if they own land that they can put an electric charging point on, they are more than happy to support funding bids, because obviously Devon acknowledge that a lot of our towns and villages, they don't have off-street parking, so, and because of the difficulties that Councillor Pierce has explained with electric cables, trailing across pavements, etc., that's why they're really keen to find off-street parking to help support installing EV charging points.
Yeah, I'm sure the parish council would be happy to support it, but they don't actually own the car parks we're talking about.
Thank you. Any other questions, members? In which case, Councillor Pierce, if I could ask you to move the recommendation.
Thank you, Leader. I move the recommendation as set out 1 to 3 in the report. Can I have a seconder for that, please? Do I have to have yeah.
Happy to second it.
Thank you.
Thank you. Members, any debate? In which, sorry, Councillor Pierce.
Yeah, as no one else is coming forward, I mean, this really is a significant step forward, and the officers and Mr. Widdicombe and Chris Brooke have done a great amount of work on bringing forward the Letty project, which, because of the various complications that have surfaced due to the leases and all this sort of thing, it's taken longer than we were hoping for. But alas, now we can see some progress being made, and I just hope that other towns and parishes take up the opportunity when Devon come forward with the next round. It's an opportunity for them to install electric vehicle charging points with grant funding that's being put forward. So it's a great opportunity, but we really are making positive steps now, which is really good news. Thank you, Leader.
Thank you, Councillor Pearce. Any other debate, members? In which case we will move to a vote. All those in favour of the recommendation?
It's unanimous. Thank you, Leader.
Thank you, members. If we could then move forward to item 9, section 106 agreement expenditure, and if I could ask Councillor Edmonds to introduce this paper. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. The purpose of this report is to provide details of Section 106 contributions received by the Council and how it is proposed to spend these contributions to enable the delivery of affordable housing, open space, sport and recreation and community facilities. Section 106 updates are normally reported to members in the quarterly capital budget monitoring report. On this occasion, a standalone report is brought before you to give additional focus on the management and use of Section 106 monies that are key to the delivery of community-based projects. The report is about projects that are written into legally binding agreements. It is not about projects that we may feel should have been included in Section 106 agreements, but have been excluded for whatever reason. That is a separate discussion. The 3 report recommendations shown on page 19 of your agenda papers summarise the report well. Recommendation 1 tells us that the Council holds £1.09 million of Section 106 contributions on the 31st of March 21, as set out in Appendix A. The table is colour-coded to indicate progress with expenditure. Linking this to the plan for West Devon, £0.616 million will fall within the Homes and Built and Natural Environment Delivery Plan, and £0.475 million will fall within the Strengthening Community Wellbeing Delivery Plan. The second recommendation asks members to note the process for consulting and informing town and parish councils regarding Section 106 contributions. The process for affordable housing is set out in Appendix C, and this will be mirrored for contributions received by the Council for open space, sport and recreation. It is through this process that ward members are also informed when Section 106 contributions are received by the Council. Towns and parishes are invited to identify any projects on which the contributions could be spent and apply for funds. And the final recommendation emphasises the important role ward members have engaging with their town and parish councils to ensure Section 106 contributions are effectively used to enable the delivery of community projects in their wards. And finally, Chair, a reminder of why the actions set out in this report are so important. There is a risk of contributions not being spent in accordance with the Section 106 agreement, and some section agreements have clawback clauses allowing developers to be repaid the money if it is not spent within a certain time frame. The careful monitoring process set out in this report and active engagement of ward members with their town and parish councils will prevent this from happening. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Edmonds. Members, any questions on the papers in front of you? Councillor Cheadle.
I've got 2 questions. One of the items in the table, I'm trying to find it here, 2531, the time limit is none. Is that right? There's absolutely no time limit on that one. It's under heritage. It's the second one under heritage.
That is as set out in the Section 106 agreement, yes, and that particular one was actually for town centre improvements and townscape heritage contributions. The £11,000, I think that's the one Councillor Cheadle's referring to. No restriction on that one. It is the date that the council receives the Section 106 money in the bank. So that is the day that the clock starts ticking, if you like, receipt of the Section 106. Yes, so that would be the end dates are shown. Those can be 10 years or 5 years. It depends what each individual Section 106 says. Yes. We must have spent the money, so the money must have gone out of our bank account and be what's called defrayed funds, so spent by the end date of the Section 106 agreement, yes.
Thank you. Any other questions, members? Councillor Ball.
Thank you, Leader. And thank the member for the report. It's a really good report, and it's nice to see all the different 106s that are in action at the moment. I suppose the one obvious question that I have, and I apologise, I did look in the report, but I couldn't see it, and it may be I just missed it. But how will members get continued updates on the items, especially those that relate to their own wards? Is the one question. We did discuss this in audit the other day, actually. Thank you.
So it's proposed to send members regular updates. So as soon as we receive any Section 106 funds, we will be advising the member of that area that the money's been received, and can you start thinking about projects that you will be wanting to spend that cash on. We'll keep sending you reminders, probably, I would have thought, every 12 months as updates come out, so that you know that we've still got that money in the bank and we need to spend it in your area. Does that?
Thank you. Yeah, that's really helpful. I guess that's when there's a sort of open amount of 106. Some of these are very specific, and it's those actually I'm particularly interested in. I think as members we should be aware. There's the one in mine and Councillor Leach's ward at the moment about the community development, which I think was for a shop, if I remember rightly. Maybe wrong. Councillor Leach is nodding, so I'll take that one. And I appreciate that, time has to elapse, things have to be done before some of these come forward, but being on top of that, I think, is really important for us as local members, for those specifically assigned 106 pots in our ward. That's primarily the question I was asking. But I thank you for the response for the other, because that is helpful too. Thank you.
Perhaps in terms of a more general overview, and I apologise I've not discussed it with officers, but perhaps when we do the quarterly Section 106 update as part of the capital monitoring, perhaps we could reissue the monitoring sheet, the control sheet, and attach it to that quarterly report, which again gives that overview and where we are in the process. And that would drill down into the individual arrangements, but I agree for ward members they would need that up-to-date monitoring so that they can work with the parish to ensure that that money is spent within the agreement term.
Through you, Leader, thank you. Yes, we can certainly attach that to our quarterly capital programme monitoring reports. And if members have found the colour coding helpful, we can carry on colour coding it in that way in the future. Thank you.
Thank you, Mrs. Buckle. That sounds really helpful. Any other questions, members? In which case, Councillor Edmonds, could I ask you to move the recommendations contained on the report?
Chair, so I move the 3 recommendations, which I referred to a few moments ago, and these can be found on page 19 of your agenda papers. Thank you.
Thank you. Members, we're in debate. Councillor Cheadle.
One of the items on the spreadsheet is sort of flashing red, if I can put it that way, in that it hasn't, no action has started. It's a 5-year time fuse, and the clock started in 2018, so it's not that far away. It's to do with play equipment in Bannerwell Street, so I will make sure I bring that to the attention of the Mayor of Bannerwell Street.
I'm sure he's already aware, Councillor Cheadle, but
I
that would
will
be
make
extremely helpful.
Absolutely sure that he is
I
aware.
think that's wise. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Hipsey had a question, I think.
So did you want me to make a comment on the Bannerwell Street play area?
Yes, please do.
We have been in touch with the town council about that, but we haven't managed to progress things that far yet. But it is owned by them, and there's still 2 years left to spend the funds. So we will make sure that we meet that deadline. And just in respect to the other question, I know that I've been having quite regular meetings with some of the Tavistock ward members about funds in Tavistock, because that's where a lot of our funds are, and also in relation to Oakhampton, the community facilities funds that we've got. The deadline for applications was last Friday, and so we'll be looking to get on and spend those.
Thank you, that's really helpful. Councillor Edmonds, and then I'll come to Councillor Hipsey.
And we are in debate, Chair. Well, can I just say, I think from the discussions, debate we've heard so far, I think we're already starting to see the benefits of bringing this report forward through the engagement and focus of the ward members here. So that's really what it's about. So is that, coordination between officers, ward members, towns and parishes to really make sure we get, full value of these contributions for our communities. So it's good to see this already working. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Hipsey, you wanted to add to the debate?
Yes, thank you, Leader. First of all, I can confirm that despite his sojourn down under, the Mayor of Bannerwell Street is aware of the issue that Councillor Cheadle brought up. Secondly, I'd like to just thank the officer team for the engagement that we've enjoyed recently about the expenditure, or the spending, if you like, of S106 money. That's been extremely helpful, very eye-opening, and I think that's backed up by the graphics, the colourful graphics that we see in front of us. It's an extremely useful tool to help us understand what has and hasn't been spent and what the intentions are. Thirdly, I'd like to just speak as a ward member with a great deal of development within my ward, and the mixed public perception of that development, not always favourable, in fact, largely unfavourable. And I'd like to urge the council to make the most of what usually is a good news story when these funds are spent on things like sports clubs, play equipment, and all the other good things that they can help us with. And I'd urge the council to publicise that as much as possible, to give residents a good fuzzy feeling that the developers are, in fact, making some contribution to the community. I think that's a really important message that we need to get out. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. I'm sure members have noted that. I'm sure officers have noted that. And I'm sure a member of our comms team that's in the room has also noted that. Thank you. Any other debate, members? In which case, we'll move to a vote on the recommendations. All in favour?
That is unanimous. Thank you, Leader.
Thank you, members. We're going to move to item 10. Item 10 is the medium-term financial strategy for the 3 years 2022-23 to 2024-25. The papers have been circulated and are in front of you. This is part of our usual process to set out a 3-year financial strategy, and must be viewed against the backdrop of long-term funding reductions for councils over recent years, and follows on from specific COVID pressures over the last 18 months, including additional expenditure and loss of income streams from car parking, planning, and uncertainty about receipts from council tax and business rates. It also must be viewed against a background of some significant unknowns, in particular the funding settlement A 3-year spending review was announced on the 7th of September. And there's also, we're also due a reset of the business rates baseline and all of the attendant difficulties that may bring us. We're still unsure about how negative revenue support grant is going to be dealt with, and there is still significant lack of clarity about the new homes bonus and how that will be dealt with moving from here. All of those items are mentioned one way or another in our recommendations. Members will note that there is a budget gap forecast for 2022-23 of some £78,000 and larger cumulative budget gaps over the ensuing 3 years for some of the reasons mentioned previously. Section 2 sets out the components of our strategy, and Section 3 sets out the assumptions that we made, including an assessment of our core spending power. Other sections deal with the Treasury management and borrowing policies, fees and charges, which will be considered by the Overview and Scrutiny Committee in February and subsequently brought to Hub with a recommendation, our financial sustainability with links into the new plan for West Devon, our capital programme and our reserves policy. And finally in Section 9 it sets out a timeline for the budget process. So it's part of our usual process at this stage, members, and there are a number of recommendations which we'll come on to in more detail, but does anybody have any questions about the papers that are in front of you or any of the aspects of the planning for our 3-year financial strategy? Any questions, members? Councillor Cheadle.
Yes, looking at the budget deficit sort of year by year across the 3 years, of course, there's that enormous hole in the second year, distinctly different from the other years. And I just wondered what the opportunity for smoothing that curve is, because it seems sort of unreasonable and probably unmanageable to the 2 years either side. The years either side, I think, are in the sort of areas where we've been before, and you know, by hook or by crook, we find some magic formula to survive. But that middle year seems significantly deep. You know, the hole is significantly deeper than it usually is, and I just wondered if we need to bear that in mind, such that we can undertake some sort of smoothing of the budget process.
Thanks, Councillor Cheadle. I think we absolutely do. Part of that large figure, of course, is due to the negative revenue support grant, which we're still unclear about, and it may not be a firm policy, but we're keeping our fingers crossed on that one and see what happens. I'm sure there are opportunities to smooth that out, and that will be part of the work of Councillor Edmonds' advisory group on resources moving forward from here. Mrs. Buckle, I don't know whether you want to add anything to that, but it is a task that is similar to one we've carried out previously with the Financial Stability Group, and we've managed to balance the books over recent years. I'm sure that it will be a significant task, but there's every prospect, I think, of closing it.
Thank you, Leader. Yes, so on page 125 of the agenda, that does show our 3-year modelling for the medium-term financial strategy. There are a couple of key points I'd like to pull out. So one of the funding mechanisms for our base budget is that on an annual basis, we do take funding from the new homes bonus income stream and use that to partly fund the revenue-based budget. We are assuming for next year and the 2 years thereafter quite a conservative figure. So in the modelling, I have only assumed that we will use 100,000 of new homes bonus towards the base budget. In this financial year, we actually received just under 300,000 of new homes bonus funding. And I think that's one area where we need to be really strong in our lobbying to ask government to maintain the sort of levels of new homes bonus funding that we've had in the past. We know that new homes bonus funding is going to go, but I think our lobbying will be around any replacement scheme for NHB being of a similar value to the district council and the borough council as we have had in the past. Indeed, if we are successful in that lobbying and we receive more new homes bonus funding, then that would decrease that budget gap in year 2 if we can use more than 100,000, for example. So I think these figures are very much a worst case scenario, and we could find that, for example, we receive more new homes bonus funding than the 100,000 we've got in the modelling. Similarly, we have assumed that we will get no lower tier services grant next year. When the government issued that this year, they did say it was a one-off funding stream. But again, in our response to the spending review for 2021, we will be lobbying that we would like to see that lower tier services grant continued into next year and thereafter. And that was worth 70,000 to us as the borough council. So again, if that could be continued, that again would be a funding stream that would help to bridge some of that funding gap. I think the other key area is around business rates income. That is a large part of why we see that £500,000 budget gap in year 2. It's a double-edged sword, really. It's because we would have the negative revenue support grant, which would take 182,000 off of our business rate income, but also we would have no pooling gain. So whereas in the next financial year and in this year we are assuming we'll get about 200,000, as soon as the business rate baseline is reset, we lose that business rate growth. So that would be 200,000 that we wouldn't get in that year 2, and that's what's also contributing to that £500,000 funding gap. So I think we certainly, in our consultation responses, we need to make the point about a damping system in the past, where there has been a fundamental review of local government finances. The government have smoothed in any increase in funding or any losses in funding. And again, we would be making the same point about we would like to see a damping system so that if there are losses from the business rate baseline reset, that comes in slowly over a period of years rather than all in one go. And making the point that we really need a multi-year settlement and to address those points about negative RSG and the smoothing of business rate income. Thank you, Leader.
Thank you, Mrs. Buckle. Any other questions, members? In which case, members, I'd like to move the 5 recommendations that are shown on pages 103 and 104, and the additional recommendation that the Hub Committee notes the forecast budget gap for 2022-23 and the position in future years. Could I have a seconder for moving the recommendations, please?
Happy to second those.
Thank you, Councillor Cheadle. Members, we're into debate. Any debate on this topic? Okay, Councillor Edmonds.
Well, just to pick up on Councillor Tudor's point and your response about that will obviously form part of the advisory group workload. And I think we're sort of scheduled to meet probably 3 times a year, but clearly I think we'll need to meet before or around the budget setting process in order to involve all the group in this discussion before we get into the budget setting process and finalise it. So absolutely. So that would be my intention, that we will be convening a meeting of the group so that we can look at in the next 3 years extremely carefully and consider the options. And hopefully we get a positive result from the 3-year review, which could change the picture significantly in terms of the negative RSG, new homes bonus. We could be in a much stronger position depending on the outcome of that announcement.
Thanks, Councillor Evans. I agree entirely. I think we do need to meet soon in order to help inform the budget setting process and get a really good connection with these figures. As far as the settlement is concerned, I wouldn't anticipate getting anything quickly. It'll almost certainly be a last minute thing, and given pressures on central government at the moment, I think we'll wait and see what happens. But I'm not sure it'll be entirely good news when it does come. Well, but we've dealt with it in the past, and we'll deal with it again.
I think in the meantime, I think we'll probably have to work on the basis that it won't happen. And if it does, it'll be a bonus. But we have to look at these figures and consider how we work through this without perhaps the good news that we would like.
Yeah, agree with that entirely. So it will always be good to have some strategies ready and waiting to go. Councillor Cheadle.
Well, it's just an observation, really. I think we're going to have to get the messaging quite careful here. The recommendation, the first recommendation, and I fully understand and accept it, is to set a strategic objective to raise the council tax by the maximum we can without triggering a referenda. But that will come around about the same time as people are really suffering on energy increases, as we've heard in the news this week, and other sort of fiscal pressures on household budgets. And at a time when not everyone's getting their refuse collected exactly when they thought they would do. So that sort of combination of things is a need for us to get the messaging absolutely right here, I think.
Thank you, Councillor Cheadle. I think that's really helpful. It's worth noting that the mooted increase at the moment, and obviously it's subject to the whole budget setting process and a decision that is made subsequent to that, any increase in council tax is likely to be lower than the prevailing inflation rate, the way things are looking at the moment. But that, I know that doesn't necessarily help people in their own circumstances, but it will be very carefully considered. Councillor Edmonds, did you want to come back on that, or? Thank you. We remain optimistic. And can I wrap up by thanking Mrs. Buckle and her team for, as usual, producing an extensive and really clear document. It's a very complex issue, and the input is always really appreciated, laying out the issues in front of us very clearly. So, members, if we can then move, please, to a vote on the recommendation. All those in favour?
Thank you, Leader. That is unanimous in favour. Thank you.
Thank you, members. If we can now move to is there an item 11? Okay. Item 11, which is month 4 budget monitoring. I think the papers of that came separately. Councillor Edmonds.
Thank you, Chair. Well, the report sets out the income and expenditure variations as at the end of July and projects a year-end deficit of 37,000 on a net budget of £7.3 million. Members will note that planning income is £52,000 ahead of target at the end of July as a result of the increased volumes of applications being received. The Planning Improvement Plan report, which appears later on the agenda, recommends that this additional income is utilised to fund additional temporary staffing in the planning team for the remainder of this year. Further one-off COVID costs have been incurred, amounting to 114,000, and car park income is showing a shortfall of 122,000 at the end of July. Although this will be partially offset by an estimated sum of £46,000 from the government's sales, fees and charges compensation scheme for the period April to June. No further payments will be made from this scheme after June. so it is hoped that the influx of visitors during summer and autumn will enable car park income to recover over the remainder of the year. The budgeted income of £50,000 from the proposed 3-weekly residual waste collections has been taken out of the budget for reasons set out in the separate waste report on today's agenda. Appendix A provides a summary of reserves which show earmarked reserves standing at £5.4 million and unearmarked reserves at £1.257 million, after allowing for the projected deficit of £37,000. Members will have noted Mrs. Buckle's explanation of the impact of business rate grants received from government on earmarked reserves in section 4 of the report. So finally, Chair, the report recommendations on page 35 of your agenda papers. The first, the committee is asked to note the forecast income and expenditure variations for the 21-22 financial year and the overall projected deficit of £37,000, which is close to a break-even position. And secondly, recommends to Council to utilise £190,000 from the COVID-19 losses earmarked reserve in 2021-22 to fund COVID expenditure and the projected net losses on car parking income in 2021-22. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Edmonds. Members, any questions? Obviously all very clear, in which case, Councillor Edmonds, would you like to move the recommendations on the report? Thank you. Thank you, Councillor. Could I have a seconder for the recommendations, please? Councillor Mott, thank you. Members, any debate? Councillor Pearce.
Thank you, Leader. I think the shortfall or deficit of 37,000 is incredibly good considering what we've gone through the last 18 months. And I really thank our financial officers for what they've done in pulling this all together. You know, 18 months ago or 16 months ago, we were facing a pretty bleak time, and it's not, you know, good now looking forward 2 or 3 years hence, should central government not realise the financial situation that a lot of councils in the country find themselves in. You know, there are some that are a lot worse off than we are at this moment. But I think we have done very well to get into a position where we have a deficit of just 37,000, you know, after what we've had to endure. So thank you to everyone involved in you know, bringing the finances to this stage. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Pearce. I'd echo that from conversations I've had with other councils around the country. So we certainly do seem to have dealt with this pretty well. Any other debate, members? In which case we'll move to a vote on the recommendations. All those in favour?
That is unanimous. Thank you, Leader.
Thank you, members. If we can move to agenda item 12, Capital Budget Monitoring 2021-2022, and again that's to be introduced by Councillor Edmonds.
Thank you, Chair. This will be very brief. The report provides an update on each of the capital projects as at the 31st of July 2021. And I think this is self-explanatory. Some of the information is restricted and would require us to move into part 2 if members wish to discuss in more detail. The programme is currently underspent due mainly to the capital schemes for the Tavistock Temporary Accommodation Development, the Community Housing Scheme and Disabled Facilities Grants. Although we are seeing a number of applications coming through now for DFGs, and I'm sure a lot of those will be completed before the year end. In line with the draft plan for West Devon, which says we will maximise grant funding opportunities for our communities, the report includes a recommendation to increase the budget for community project grants from 15,000 to 30,000. And I think it's two report recommendations can be found on page 51 of your agenda papers. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor. Any questions, members? Councillor Pearce.
Within the report, there is an item saying that funding for larger scale tree planting can be taken from this fund. I do have concerns with what we've got planned or proposed by some members moving forward, because in the past we've always used community project grants for village halls and the like. If we start tapping into this for tree planting, we're going to have a problem, I think. So I would hope that moving forward, and I ask this as the lead for communities, that we hopefully will get grant funding for any significant tree planting schemes which might be agreed by this council on proposals brought forward by members. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Pearce. That's noted. Do we want to add anything to that? I think there are some grant funds available for tree planting, which we would do well to tap into before drawing on this money.
I think Councillor Pearce raises a very valid point. And yeah, if we can channel that towards other funding schemes, I think that would be a very good idea, so as we can concentrate on perhaps other types of community facility, which may be more tangible, shall we say, than all important projects. But the funding stream, I think, is a good point.
Thank you. Chief Executive just advised me that we are pursuing some potential funding even now, so it would make sense to use that in the first instance. Councillor Crozier, did you want to come in there?
Yeah. Sorry, thank you, Leader. On the tree planting, as you quite rightly say, there's a lot of other monies available in free trees from the Woodland Trust in one place and another. But in Biferras, we've done 2 crowdfunding schemes for things that the Parish Council thought they shouldn't be paying for, and one was the restoration of the George VI coronation clock. And we received within 30 quid of what the price of the replacing the clock was, which was £1,200 in 6 weeks. And I give that as an example. There's a lot of community spirit there for these projects to go ahead. If you're really interested in doing one of these schemes, go to your community and ask them. So thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. I think that's a really good advice and shows what can be done at a local level with the right imagination and the right leadership. Councillor Cheadle.
Thank you. Just a quick question of clarification. On the community projects grant element of the paper, increasing it from 15,000 to 30,000, are we keeping the criteria and the maximum amount that's available per application the same? We're doubling the number of applications we can cope with rather than doubling the size of a particular application.
My understanding is that the criteria remain the same. Yes, I'm getting nods of approval. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other questions, members? In which case, Councillor Edmonds, could I ask you to move the recommendations?
Certainly, Chair. I move the recommendations on page 51 of your agenda papers, which ask members to endorse the contents of the report and to increase the budget for community project grants from 15 to 30,000. Thank you.
Could I have a seconder, please? Councillor Mott, thank you. Members, any debate? In which case, we'll move to a vote. All those in favour of the recommendations?
Thank you, Leader. That is 8 and unanimous. Thank you very much.
Thank you, members. If we can move to agenda item 13, the Planning Improvement Plan, and Councillor Mott, I believe, is going to introduce this one.
Thank you, Chair. We seem to be rattling through the agenda today in good speed. Members and everyone else is aware that planning and enforcement is a very emotive subject, and there will always be those that are unhappy with the decision made. That said, the majority of applications are dealt with in a timely manner and with little controversy, with just a few being drawn to members' attention. Due to the ongoing increase in the demand for the service, members are aware of the need to review the planning and enforcement provision of the Council. This report details progress made and measures in place to monitor effectiveness and customer satisfaction. Officers have attended training sessions delivered by PASS and continue to have regular ongoing meetings with senior officers and other services which inform the process. Public consultation for the validation checklist closed on the 14th of September, and we are waiting for feedback of the Memorandum of Understanding with towns and parishes. This in turn will help to inform the Planning Customer Charter. We have been successful in the recruitment to some of the vacancies, and I would like to welcome the new officers to the team. We hope to ease some of the workload across the service with this. Recruitment remains an issue, however, and we will strive to deliver the best service we can while utilising all resources available. The additional income requested will allow us to do so and has been detailed in the monitoring report already discussed. I therefore ask members to support the recommendations as listed on page 65 of the papers before you.
Thank you, Councillor. Members, any questions? Councillor Cheadle.
Thank you. I very much welcome this report and the action plan. At the time that the review started, a number of members had various concerns about the way things were being done, and inputted into the sort of beginning of the process, if I can put it that way. It's difficult to see from the action plan whether those inputs will be actioned. I mean, some of them are relatively trivial. I remember one, just from memory, was that pages are numbered or paragraphs are numbered, so that when things are being discussed, you know, the one on the screen isn't different from the one in the written pack, as so often is the case. So things like that, which members specifically asked to be included in the review, can you give me any assurance that they have been scoped in?
Yes, they have.
Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Edmonds.
Thank you, Chair. 3 questions, if I may, please. I think at 4.2 in the report, it talks about the validation progress with the validation of application. And I think it mentions that the backlog has been reduced from something like 300 to 54 in terms of registration and validation, which is a brilliant result. But does that in itself, means a sort of an influx of application in front of the specialists, which in itself is causing an additional pressure that they're now having to work through? Have we just moved the logjam along to the next level? And if so, what impact or how are we going to deal with that in a reasonable way?
Perhaps I could ask Mr. Powell to answer that one.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, I mean, yes, to a degree it has. It's moved that workload down to the specialists, but what it's done is stop the failure of people actually just saying, where is my application? They put an application in, it hasn't even been registered, so they're not even aware that anything's happening with it. So we're managing the demand by keeping in touch with applicants at this stage. So an improvement, but a little bit of extra pressure on our specialists at this stage.
Shall I continue? Looking at the improvement plan itself now, and 1.3 is just a request really, and this is to do with the benchmarking against performance of other councils, and it says there's going to be reported to DM committees on a 6-monthly basis. Would that be possible to be reported to the wider membership? I'd be very interested to see that performance. I'm sure it would filter through, but can we make sure that that peer group performance is reaching all members?
as Councillor Edmonds is aware, that all of the papers are available to all members for their perusal. So if you wish to see that, I would suggest you read those minutes.
Thank you, Councillor Mott. Duly noted. I'm reluctant to ask the next question, but I will risk it. Can't wait to find out what the answer is. 9.4 talks about invalid applications. Determined baseline target following review of how to... Yeah, we're seeing an awful lot of rejected applications. It just makes a comment here. Consider retaining part of fees if application has been returned to cover costs. Mr. Powell.
I would like to say pass that to the lead member, but I'll answer. Yeah, I mean, it's something that we can consider. There's administration involved with that, so we've got to balance up what's the best thing to do. The first thing we want to do is actually educate the agents, work with them to make sure that we get valid applications in the first place. As previously mentioned, the validation checklist is out there, and we've got the developers and agents forum started again, and Councillor Mott will be coming to the next one to lay down the law, for want of a better term, with the agents about the quality of their applications. If we can't see an improvement, we will reject more, and we'll expect them to improve that. An option we've got is to retain a part of that fee prior to doing that, which may act as an incentive to improve the quality of the applications.
Yeah, well, 50% is far too high in terms of a failure rate. And Councillor Mott, to be even-handed, do you know if any other councils already use this practice of, retaining part of the fee to cover these type of rejected applications?
I'm not aware of any other councils. However, as we like to see ourselves as a trailblazing council, let's lead the way.
I totally support that. I don't think we can continue to see that high failure rate for all the obvious reasons in terms of time, pressure on our already overworked staff. So I would hope that this is something we can seriously consider and implement as and when it's appropriate.
Thank you, councillors. Councillor Crozier, you had a question.
Thank you, Leader. As several of you know, I've had a very contentious, well, not a contentious place, but a very slow decision-making process. And it unfortunately involved one of the temporary planning officers. And what made it more difficult was the fact that he was based 170 miles away from West Devon. He'd never done a site visit. He had no idea the topography or what the place looked like, the standard of the property and all the rest of it. I have reservations about using temporary planning officers if they're not in a position to do a site visit, because I think it is important that the planner is able to come and see the site visit. And may I comment on something that Councillor Edmonds was mentioning just now, the fact with agents, they are acting on behalf of their clients, and they do try to cut the cloth or save their clients money by not doing all the things they probably should be doing. And I think that's the biggest education. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. We're still in questions, I think, at the moment. I don't know whether Mr. Powell would like to comment on that, or...
I don't know that there was a question in there.
We may have to come back to that under debate, I think. Any other questions, members? In which case, Councillor Mott, would you like to move the recommendations?
Thank you, Chair. I would like to move the recommendations as listed on page 65 of the papers before you. Thank you.
Thank you. Could I have a seconder, please? Councillor Pearce, thank you. And we're now into debate. So, Councillor Crozier, I don't know whether you want to rephrase your comment, just very, very briefly.
Yes, indeed. I think there's a problem in using temporary planning officers, especially if they come from a long distance away. I think what we should be looking for is planning officers. If simple cases, we probably don't need a site visit, all well and good. but for when a site visit is probably going to be the best way of been looking at the job in hand, the application in hand. It should be done by a local officer so they can have full knowledge.
Thank you. I know the case in question, so I understand your frustrations. Mr. Powell, I don't know if you want to answer. I guess the response is somewhere around resetting after COVID and just how we deal with the present situation. But if you have any comments to add, that would be much appreciated.
Thank you, Chair. I mean, absolutely. If we could get a set of local planning officers we could retain for a considerable period of time and establish some stability, that would be absolutely fantastic. And that's clearly our intention through this improvement plan. But it is, you know, we have to plug the gaps. And sometimes it means we have to use agency staff and staff who unfortunately are some way away from the borough. I think in terms of site visits, again, we have to get the balance right, where we can effectively and properly carry out the planning function using remote, you know, whether it's Google Maps or whatever, we will do that, but clearly we need to make sure that judgment's right, and where site visits are needed, they need to happen to ensure that the right decision's made in terms of the planning issues. So on specific cases, more than happy to pick up with you, Councillor Crozier, on that case, which I am also aware of. But part of this plan is to get some stability and embed officers who are going to be with us for a period of time.
Thank you, Mr. Powell. Councillor Pearce.
Thank you, Leader. I really welcome these recommendations. I have been involved in planning for a number of years now, and it really concerns me the way that things have gone in recent times. Unfortunately, those of us who were involved in T18, where we had to make really significant structural changes due to the significant cuts in government funding, we didn't realise the effect that would have on the planning service. And things were starting to come out before COVID, and unfortunately COVID has made the situation far worse. We have a national shortage of planning officers across the country, and unfortunately some agents have taken advantage of that, of the situation we've been in during COVID. And it really, I pick up on Councillor Crozier's comment that agents are working to what applicants can pay. I find that quite staggering that we're accepting that, actually, because we should have a standard which we work to and which they have to work to. And for agents to put forward an application which in some cases do not have the necessary accompanying paperwork, increases the workload of our planning officers who are already overstretched with the workload they've got, because the huge uplift in applications over the COVID period. So, I really welcome this, and I think we've got to be a lot tougher. We've been far too lenient. Okay, you have to make allowances for COVID, but, agents and architects are professional people, and they should be working to the standards that we put in place, and they've got to be a lot higher than what we've allowed them to get away with recently. Thank you, Leader.
Thank you, Councillor Pearce. Councillor Mott, would you like?
Yeah, I think we've already explained. Planning is emotive. Planning is difficult. Not everybody likes the decision that has been made. T18 aside, I think even without that, we would have been struggling to recruit officers given the current shortage that we have at the moment. And I think members need to remember that we do provide a very good service. We only get involved in the applications that are contentious for whatever reason, be it the applicant doesn't like the speed that it's moving at, they don't like the decision, or agents decide that they are going to throw a curveball. We are reliant heavily on the responses from outside bodies for the consultation process, and that sometimes leads to a delay in a decision being made, as is the need for more information that very often the agents are reluctant to provide or are slow in providing. So we are hampered by those things. So I think members do need to remember that we only see the 5% of the cases that need further action, and usually because somebody's shouting. We do provide a good service. We are working hard to provide a good service, and we need to work with all of those, including the agents, to provide the relevant information that we need. As you know, there isn't a standard at the moment that we can insist on. Some applications come in on the back of a fag packet, some are highly detailed, and we have to work within those parameters. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Mott. Can I bring in Councillor Edmonds there?
Yeah, well, thank you, Chair. And yeah, I fully support everything that Councillor Mott just explained. And I think we've mentioned most of the stakeholders in our planning process, but perhaps not too much on the people who are actually doing it, the specialist and the people who are doing the validation, etc. So I think we just, I'm always mindful of the pressures that they must be working under in terms of the number of applications to try to deal with, you know, agents, applicants, etc. So I spare a thought for them, and they're doing their very best, and they're doing a really good job under tough circumstances. And I'm sure with a well thought out, structured plan that we will work through this and return to normal service levels as soon as possible.
Thank you, Councillor Edmonds. Can I bring in Councillor Yelland?
Yes, thank you, Leader. Yes, I was just going to say, I welcome this, and it's a good piece of work that has been undertaken in looking at this planning improvement plan and how it's actually going to be delivered. Certainly welcome the additional resource in terms of staffing, and the concept of ensuring that as planning is considered before it gets to committee level, is that the officers or the relevant staff get all the help they can in terms of ensuring that the work that they are doing, they're able to do as efficiently as possible to help get the right decisions and the best decisions first time. I know at DM we receive the information from the appeals as to what has happened at appeal, and that is evidence is clearly showing that it is good decisions that are being made, whether it's through the scheme of delegation or through coming to committee. But it is also ensuring that our staff are actually equipped and able to carry out that process with other parties who are involved in being part of that process to keep that as efficient as possible. And in terms of the validation scheme, I think in particular, it's not having that time wasted from running backwards and forwards. So there does need to be that better communication. There does need to be that strengthening of those relationships and greater understanding of what this council expects first time in terms of what can be provided to ensure those staff are able to progress the application, because they have a lot on their plate, and there's a lot of planning applications coming forward, and each applicant is entitled to have that looked at fairly, have it looked at properly in a timely fashion, and the staff need to be able to do that. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Yelland. Can I bring in Councillor Ratcliffe?
Thank you, Leader. I fully support the intention of this agenda item. I think far too often people are making planning applications. They're intentionally not putting any information on it, not a dimension, horizontally, vertically. So how does the planning officer understand what is going on there? They don't put anything about materials, and I think it is done intentionally. I think just to really cause chaos in what has finally been approved. So I really do fully support this. I suffer just as much as the planning officers do in trying to understand what are they trying to do, what are they trying to say, because the drawing is of very little importance. All it is meant to do is to convey information to the planning officer and then ultimately to the builder as to what you want to be done there. And I think all the time we allow this to go on, it is really just causing problems for the staff. So I fully accept what is here, and I will certainly support it. Thank you, Leader.
Thank you. Members, any other debate on this issue? In which case we'll move to a vote. All those in favour of the recommendations?
That is unanimous. Thank you, Leader.
Thank you, members. We're going to move to item 14 on the agenda, which is the waste collection frequency trial. Councillor Daniel, the lead member for the Environment, can't be with us. Councillor Mott, with your prior experience of this, would you be in a position to introduce it for us?
I don't know that members are ready for me again, are they? Members will recall that they were asked to allow a 3-weekly trial to commence in areas of the borough in June 2019, and despite extensions to that trial due to the pandemic, it has been difficult to gather the information required to make an informed decision on extending that service to all households. This, along with the ongoing National Waste Strategy consultations and national driver shortages, mean it would be irresponsible for us to extend the 3-weekly collection to the rest of the borough at this time. That does not mean the exercise has been a waste of time, though. It has allowed us to gather valuable data which will inform further service provision and how we communicate this with residents. We aim to continue the brilliant efforts most of our residents make with regard to recycling and want to encourage those who currently do not do so. I personally wish to thank those that took part in the trial for the feedback given, their patience while the service was changed, and their ongoing willingness to reduce their residual waste and improve the recycling rates. We all have a responsibility to the waste we produce from the moment we pick it up in the shop and bring it home. Being aware of this, we can continue to be one of the best performing areas in Devon. I'm therefore happy to propose the recommendations as listed.
Thank you, Councillor. Members, any questions on the paper that's in front of you? Councillor Edmonds.
Thank you, Chair. If we considered this again at some stage in the future, would we need to run a further trial, or could we proceed on the basis of what we have learned?
I'm sure Mrs. Savage will be able to answer that better than I, but I would hope that we would be able to proceed without a further trial.
Thank you. The information on the tonnages is inconclusive, as is written in the report. However, I wouldn't recommend a further trial. It's obvious from the trial that members of the public accepted it quite happily, and we have no doubt from information we've gained from other local authorities that a 3-weekly collection does reduce residual waste and does increase recycling. So I don't think there will be a need for another trial.
All right, thank you, Mr. Salmon. I'm pleased to hear that, because that kind of makes it an option to reconsider at some point, hopefully. But in the meantime, and I see there is note of communication strategy around the recycling rate, which is currently 55%. I think it's been higher in the past, if I recall correctly. So there's no reflection on our services, but perhaps slightly disappointed that here we are in the midst of a climate crisis that we're still looking at 55. And we're one of the better performers in Devon. So that makes me more concerned about where we're going with climate change and how seriously perhaps some people take this. So that is a concern. And I know there's going to be a communication strategy that is in the Natural Environment Delivery Plan as well, I note. So that's good. But I'm wondering if that's enough. Is that really going to make the difference? Clearly, we need to raise that figure to whatever, 75, 80%, who knows? And I'm just wondering now, could our focus move from the 3-weekly collection, which was a good piece of work? How can we perhaps find a way of increasing this performance at this critical time?
Thank you. I think that's a good point. It's perhaps something for the Natural Environment Advisory Group to consider. I don't know whether Mrs. Savage has any thoughts on that, but it's certainly something that we can take forward in conjunction with comms, I think.
Thank you. I think the communications in waste over the past year in West Devon has definitely not been as high as we have done in the past. And it's by keeping that communication profile really high that you keep your recycling rate really high. You're quite right, we almost reached 60% at one stage, but that was straight after a major service change, bringing in the food waste collections, when we did a huge amount of communications. So you're absolutely right, the focus should be on communications, and it will allow us to increase that recycling rate.
May Chair, I say that, this council has done absolutely everything to make recycling as easy, as straightforward and clear as possible. So I think the council has done its bit in terms of facilitating. More communication would be great. But, I'm not criticising what the council has done. What I'm saying is there is an absolute need to collectively across the county for us to increase our cycling rates. And whether we need to work, as I know we're intended to, with Devon, and surely that must be very near the top of the agenda, at a time like this, that we are struggling with barely 50%, perhaps on average, recycling rates, to me, seems to tell me there is something amiss.
Thank you. Can I bring in Mr. Powell and then Councillor Mott?
Thank you, Chair. Just to confirm, there is a specific action within the natural environment thematic delivery plan around this to actually reduce at source and then to increase recycling rates for the very reason, driving that down is one of the biggest impacts we can have in terms of climate change. So that is there and will be actioned. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Mott?
Thank you, Chair. It is always a disappointment that we don't seem to be able to get our recycling rates higher. We seem to be preaching to the converter in many cases, and it's encouraging those that currently don't see the need to recycle to actually start recycle. I'm always astounded when I go past some places at the amount of black bags that are put out and no recycling bins. And then you go past another household where all the bins are out and one black bag. So it can be done. We have made it as easy as possible. We have put the communication out there. I appreciate it's not been as much in the last few months as it might have been. But at some point, we have to get the population, not just in this borough, but nationally as well, that we are responsible for the waste we produce from the moment we pick it up and take it home. We have to start being more responsible with that and take that into consideration. And we do need to be more responsible as individuals to start recycling more and to be more responsible for what we produce.
Thank you, Councillor Mott. Councillor Cheadle.
Thank you. Can I just make sure my sort of understanding of what the paper's saying is right, that we've done the trial, but we're holding back from implementing it because the National Waste Strategy has yet to be published, and that might say you have to pick up waste every fortnight rather than 3 weeks. Might do. And we've got the driver crisis that probably is not a good time to start moving things around. But if the waste strategy, the National Waste Strategy, comes out and says 3 weekly bin collections are fine, and the driver's crisis calms down, have we done everything we need to have done now to then implement a 3 weekly bin collection? Or is there something else we have to do before we do that?
Thank you, Chair. I think it's really important to note that the National Waste Strategy is not just looking at the frequency of residual collections, it's also looking at a few other areas which will change what waste members of the public put out for collection by local authorities. So at this stage, my advice would be to wait until that information is available, which we think we've not been given a date, but we would expect it, because the government want to move it quite quickly, we would expect something to come through by Christmas, and to examine that first before any decisions are made. Because if that changes the makeup of the waste being put out on the doorstep, it also has an effect on how successful a 3 weekly would be or not. It also has an effect on what kind of vehicles we need to put out, etc. So there are a lot of different things to actually consider. We've done everything we can in terms of, I think, public acceptance of a 3 weekly waste collection, but I wouldn't want to go any further than that until I'd seen that final draft of the English Waste Strategy and the Environment Bill, or the Environment Act.
Thank you, Mr Savage. Councillor Pearce.
Thank you, Leader. I just wonder what the situation is with vehicles if we were to decide to go forward with a 3 weekly collection. Should the government give it support, what would be the timeline that following that decision before the vehicles would be available to deal with a 3 weekly collection? Thank you.
Thank you. Well, again, that depends. I'm sorry, I can't give you any absolute concrete answers at the moment. So what would probably happen with vehicles is you may be able to save 1 or 2 refuse vehicles, but then you'd have to procure 1 or 2 recycling vehicles. Probably more recycling vehicles than you save on refuse vehicles because they're compaction vehicles. So you'd probably need more. At the moment, as you will be aware, there was over a year lead-in time for ordering those vehicles because there was only one organisation that was producing them. There is now at least 2 organisations that produce quality recycling vehicles, which has reduced that lead-in time. But bearing in mind the effects of COVID and the supplier chains, I wouldn't like to put a figure on it because it does change from month to month. But we are still talking long lead-in times, Councillor.
Thank you.
Thank you. Any other questions, councillors? In which case, if I could ask Councillor Mott to propose the recommendations.
Thank you, Chair. Members, I am happy to propose the recommendations as listed on pages 83 and 84 of the papers before you.
Could I have a seconder, please? Councillor Pearce, thank you. Members, any debate? Councillor Pearce.
Thank you, Leader. I am very disappointed that we are not going ahead with this at this time, but I fully understand the reasons why. I have been for a long time, as Mrs. Savage will remember, that we should be moving to a 3 weekly black bag collection. I do take issues with the remarks in item 4.3 on page 87, where other authorities have moved to a 3 weekly residual collection have seen a significant increase in recycling, reduction in residual waste. And therefore it's unlikely that West Devon, because we've done a very high level of recycling over the years, we're not likely to get that sort of uplift. I have to agree with Councillor Mott. It horrifies me that how many properties you drive by on the collection day and there's no recycling boxes but just a big heap of black bags. And, you know, I feel that had we moved to a 3 weekly collection, which, you know, other authorities have done, you know, we will see an uplift, and it would be good to get up over the 60% mark. I'm very pleased to see that recommendation 5 has been included. I think that's very important because once central government have decided what is going to be recycled and what local authorities are going to be dealing with, and whether we can move to a 3 weekly collection, you know, we can start moving towards that. And hopefully we can do it fairly quickly if the vehicles to deal with it are available. Thank you, Leader.
Thank you, Councillor. Any other debate, members? Councillor Cheadle.
Sound a bit like a worn record here, but we will have to get the messaging on this right as well, because we've made quite a lot of fuss about 3 weekly bin collections and how it's going to be the future and what have you, and people are expecting it to happen. It's sort of intuitive. It's the sort of thing you automatically think is a good idea, and people won't realise why we're not doing it. So there is a clever little messaging effort to put in here somewhere.
Yeah, I agree with that.
Thank you, Councillor Pearce. That's noted. I'm sure we will. Councillor Crozier.
Yeah, the communication issues are very difficult at the moment because of a lot of miscollections. Be fair, as I understand, Station Road hadn't had a food waste collection for 3 weeks, and they really wonder what's happening. Now, you try to give the message, what we've been told, on how to report these issues. Some people do insist on leaving their rubbish out for the whole week because of the non-collection. Most responsible people do take it in, however. But we are in a very touchy time at the moment dealing with the public because the inability to complete all the collections on the days allotted.
Yeah, thank you, Councillor, and that is, of course, being worked on, has been worked on for some time. So, any other debate, members? In which case, we'll move to a vote on the recommendations. All those in favour?
Thank you, Leader. That's unanimous as well. Thank you.
Thank you, members. That brings the items on the agenda for this afternoon to a close. So thank you all for your attendance and contribution, and to those that have been listening.